My name is Marcus, and this happened last year when I moved into a studio apartment in Chicago. I was 23, fresh out of college, and this was my first place living completely alone. The building was old, like 1920s old, but it had character, and the rent was cheap. My unit was on the second floor, right above another studio apartment. I'm telling you this because what happened below me still makes me check under my bed every single night. The first 2 weeks were perfect. The neighborhood was quiet, my apartment had good natural light, and I could actually afford it. I barely heard my downstairs neighbor. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps or a door closing, but nothing excessive. Normal apartment sounds. I hadn't met them yet, but that wasn't unusual in a city like Chicago. People keep to themselves. Then one night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to music. Not loud music, but definitely music. It was coming from directly below me, right under my bedroom. It sounded like old jazz music, the kind from the 1940s. Scratchy, like it was playing on a record player. I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of creepy at that hour, but I figured my neighbor was just a night owl. I put in earplugs and went back to sleep. The music happened again 2 nights later. Same time. Same kind of music. This time, I got up and walked around my apartment, trying to pinpoint exactly where it was coming from. It was definitely the unit below me. When I pressed my ear to the floor in my bedroom, I could hear it clearly, that old, warbling jazz music. But then I heard something else. Underneath the music, there was this rhythmic thumping sound. Like someone was hitting the floor. Or the ceiling. Their ceiling. My floor. The thumping wasn't random, it had a pattern. 3 slow thumps, pause, 3 slow thumps, pause. Over and over. I knocked on my floor, thinking maybe they'd realize they were being loud. The music stopped immediately. So did the thumping. I waited, listening in the silence. Then, after about 30 seconds, there were 3 loud bangs on their ceiling, so hard that I felt the vibration through my feet. My heart started racing. I didn't knock back. I just went back to bed and tried to convince myself it was nothing. Over the next week, the music started happening every single night. Always between 2 and 3 a.m. Always that same scratchy jazz. And always, that thumping pattern. 3 thumps, pause, 3 thumps. I decided to mention it to my landlord. I called him and explained the situation, told him about the music, the thumping, the weird hours. He went quiet for a second, then said something that made my skin crawl. "What unit did you say you're in?" "Unit 204, I replied. "There's no one in 104, he said. "That unit's been vacant for 3 months. I laughed nervously. "That's impossible. I hear someone down there every night." He insisted the unit was empty. He even said he'd come by to check it out himself. But when I asked when, he said he'd get back to me. He never did. I couldn't let it go. The next night, when the music started, I left my apartment and went downstairs. The hallway was dimly lit, and Unit 104 was at the end. I walked up to the door and stood there, listening. The music was playing. I could hear it clearly through the door, that same old jazz song. I knocked. The music stopped instantly. I knocked again. Nothing. Then I tried the doorknob. It was locked, obviously. I pressed my ear to the door and whispered, "Hello." That's when I heard footsteps inside the apartment. Slow, deliberate footsteps walking toward the door. They stopped right on the other side. I could see the shadow of feet blocking the light under the door. Someone was standing right there, inches away from me, separated only by that door. My voice shook when I said, "I know someone's in there." The shadow didn't move. Whoever was on the other side just stood there in complete silence. I waited for maybe 15 seconds that felt like 15 minutes. Then the shadow moved away, and the footsteps walked back into the apartment. I practically ran back upstairs. Okay, I need to pause here real quick. If this story is freaking you out, good, that's the point. But before I tell you what happened next, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. These stories don't write themselves, and your support keeps this channel alive. Plus, if you subscribe, you'll never miss the next terrifying story. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this one ends. Okay, back to the nightmare. The next morning, I went to the building manager's office in person. I demanded to know who was in Unit 104. The manager, a woman in her 60s named Diane, pulled up the records on her computer. She confirmed what my landlord had said, Unit 104 was vacant. It had been empty since the previous tenant moved out in July. Then who the hell is in there at night? I asked. She looked uncomfortable. Maybe you're hearing sounds from another unit. These old buildings, the acoustics can be weird. I wasn't buying it. I pulled out my phone and played a voice recording I'd made the night before. You could clearly hear the jazz music and the thumping. Her face went pale. "I'm calling the police," she said. 2 officers showed up within 20 minutes. Diane led them to Unit 104, and I followed close behind. One officer knocked on the door and announced, "Chicago PD, open up." Nothing. He knocked again. Still nothing. Diane unlocked the door with her master key, and the officer pushed it open. The apartment was empty. Completely empty. No furniture, no belongings, nothing. Just bare walls and dusty floors. But here's the thing that made my blood turn to ice. In the middle of the main room, there was an old record player. The kind with the big horn. And next to it was a stack of records. The officer walked over to it. "This yours?" he asked Diane. She shook her head, looking genuinely confused. "I've never seen that before." The officer crouched down and examined the record player. "It's plugged in," he said. He pressed the power button, and the turntable started spinning. There was already a record on it. The needle dropped, and that jazz music started playing, the exact same song I'd been hearing every night. We all stood there in stunned silence. Then the officer lifted the needle and turned off the player. "Someone's been coming in here," he said. The police dusted for fingerprints. They found dozens, way more than there should have been in a vacant apartment. They also checked the locks and found scratches around the doorframe, suggesting someone had been picking the lock regularly. But the worst discovery came when one officer opened the closet. Inside, on the floor, was a blanket, a pillow, some empty food containers, and a pair of binoculars. On the closet wall, someone had carved tally marks. I counted them. 47 marks. "Someone's been sleeping here," the officer said. He picked up the binoculars and looked up at the ceiling. And I think I know why. He pointed up. There were holes drilled into the ceiling, small holes, barely noticeable. Holes that looked directly up into my apartment. Into my bedroom. I felt like I was going to throw up. The police searched the entire apartment and found more disturbing evidence. Under the blanket were photographs. Dozens of them. Pictures of me entering and leaving the building. Pictures of me through my windows. Pictures of me sleeping, taken from below through those holes in the ceiling. The thumping I'd been hearing wasn't random. Someone had been down there, watching me through those holes, and banging on the ceiling to scare me. To let me know they were there. The police installed cameras in the unit and told me to stay somewhere else for a few nights. I stayed with a friend. 3 days later, they caught him. A man in his 40s who'd been evicted from the building 2 years earlier and had been breaking into Unit 104 regularly. He'd been squatting there, watching tenants above him. I wasn't his first victim. He's in jail now, awaiting trial for stalking, breaking and entering, and a list of other charges. I broke my lease immediately. Diane didn't even try to fight it. She felt horrible about the whole thing. I moved to a different neighborhood, into a newer building with security cameras and a doorman. But I still hear that jazz music sometimes when I'm trying to fall asleep. That scratchy, warbling sound. And those 3 thumps. Even though I know he's locked up, even though I know I'm safe now, I can't shake the feeling that someone's watching me from below. So here's my advice: if you live in an apartment, know who your neighbors are. And if you hear something weird, don't just brush it off. Because sometimes, the scariest thing isn't a ghost or a demon, it's another human being who's decided you're worth obsessing over. And that's something no locked door can fully protect you from. My name is Jenna, and I'm 28 years old. This story takes place about 8 months ago when I was working as a night shift nurse at a hospital just outside of Seattle. If you've never worked nights in a hospital, let me tell you, it's a different world. It's quiet, it's eerie, and you see things that the day shift never sees. But what happened with one particular patient still haunts me to this day. I'd been working night shifts for about 2 years at this point, so I was used to the atmosphere. The fluorescent lights humming, the occasional code being called, the families sleeping in waiting rooms. Our floor was the cardiac unit, so we mostly dealt with older patients recovering from heart procedures. Generally calm. Generally predictable. Then, one night in March, a man was admitted to room 312. His name was David. He was 54 years old, came in with chest pains, and seemed normal enough at first. Pleasant, even. He thanked me when I took his vitals and made small talk about the weather. Nothing out of the ordinary. But then I noticed something odd. Every time I walked past his room throughout the night, and I walked past it a lot because it was right across from the nurse's station, he was awake. Not just awake, but sitting straight up in bed, staring directly at the doorway. Staring at me. Around 2 a.m., I went into his room to check his floor. He was sitting in that same position, back straight, hands folded in his lap, eyes wide open. I smiled politely and said, "Can't sleep?" He didn't respond right away. He just kept staring at me with this blank expression. Then, finally, he said, "I'm waiting." Waiting for what? I asked, trying to stay professional. For her to come back, he said. I assumed he meant a family member. I'm sure your wife will be back to visit tomorrow during visiting hours. He shook his head slowly. Not my wife. The other nurse. The one who was here before you. That was weird because I was the only nurse assigned to his section that night. I'm sorry, I think there's some confusion. I'm the only nurse on this floor tonight. His expression didn't change. No. There was another one. She came into my room around midnight. She stood right where you're standing and watched me sleep. A chill ran down my spine, but I tried to stay calm. Sometimes patients have vivid dreams, especially with the medications you're on. It was probably just a dream. He smiled then. Not a friendly smile. A knowing smile. It wasn't a dream, Jenna. She told me your name. I finished checking his floor as quickly as possible and got out of there. My hands were shaking as I walked back to the nurse's station. I told my colleague, Marcus, what had just happened. He laughed it off and said David was probably just confused from the medication. But I couldn't shake the feeling. How did he know my name? My name tag was clipped to my scrubs, sure, but he said someone told him my name. Someone who came into his room at midnight. I checked the security logs. No one had entered or exited the cardiac unit around midnight except for me and Marcus. No other nurses. No doctors. No one. Around 4 a.m., I had to go back into David's room to administer medication. He was in that same position again, sitting up, staring at the door. When I walked in, he didn't look at me. He was looking past me, at the doorway. She's back, he whispered. I froze. Who's back? The other nurse. She's standing right behind you. I spun around. No one was there. The hallway was empty. When I turned back to David, he was smiling that same unsettling smile. You can't see her, but I can. She's been here every night this week. After my shift ended at 7 a.m., I couldn't let it go. I went to the hospital records department and asked about room 312 specifically. I wanted to know if anything unusual had happened in that room recently. The records clerk looked uncomfortable when I asked. Why do you want to know? She asked. I just had a patient say some strange things, and I want to make sure I'm not missing something. She hesitated, then pulled up the records on her computer. Room 312 has had a higher than average incident rate over the last 6 months. What kind of incidents? Patients reporting seeing staff members who don't exist. Patients experiencing vivid hallucinations. And she trailed off. And what? 3 patients in that room have coded and died in the last 6 months. All during the night shift. All between 2 and 4 a.m. My stomach dropped. Before I go any further, I need you to hit that subscribe button right now. I'm serious. If you're enjoying this story and you want to hear more real-life horror experiences from people like me, that little subscribe button helps me keep bringing you this content. Plus, the next part of this story is going to mess with your head, so you'll want to make sure you don't miss any future uploads. Okay, let's continue. I came back from my shift that night even though part of me didn't want to. David was still in room 312, and when I walked past, he was sitting in that same upright position, staring at the doorway. This time, I decided to do something I probably shouldn't have done. I pulled up David's full medical history on the system. I needed to know if he had a history of psychiatric issues or hallucinations. What I found made everything worse. David had been admitted to our hospital multiple times over the past year. But here's the kicker, every single time he was admitted, he requested room 312. Specifically. And every time, he reported seeing the other nurse. I scrolled further back in his records and found something that made my blood run cold. 2 years ago, David had been admitted for a minor procedure. During that stay, one of our night shift nurses, a woman named Elaine, had been assigned to his care. According to incident reports, David had become obsessed with Elaine. He would watch her constantly, ask her personal questions, and try to keep her in his room as long as possible. Elaine had reported feeling uncomfortable and requested to be reassigned. 3 weeks after David was discharged, Elaine died in a car accident on her way home from a night shift. That night, I confronted David directly. I walked into his room and closed the door behind me. "I know about Elaine," I said. His face lit up. "You do? Why do you keep coming back here? Why do you request this room?" He looked at me like I was stupid. "Because this is where I can see her. She comes to visit me here. She stands in the doorway, just like she used to. Sometimes she comes closer. Sometimes she talks to me." "Elaine is dead," I said firmly. "She died 2 years ago." "I know," he said softly. "But she's not really gone. She's still here. She's always here. And soon, she'll take someone else with her." "What does that mean?" He pointed at me. "She told me. She said she's lonely. She said she wants company. And she's choosing you next." I reported everything to my supervisor immediately. They contacted the police and pulled David's full background. Turns out, there were multiple restraining orders against him from different women over the years. The car accident that killed Elaine. It was never fully investigated, but her brake lines had been found cut. David was removed from the hospital and taken into police custody. They're still investigating whether he was involved in Elaine's death, but there's enough evidence to suggest he was. As for the other nurse he kept seeing, I don't know what that was. Maybe it was guilt manifesting as hallucinations. Maybe it was something else. But I'll tell you this, I requested to be transferred off the night shift after that. And I've never walked past room 312 again without feeling like someone's watching me from inside. So here's what I learned from this experience: trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. And if someone makes you uncomfortable, even if they're a patient, even if they seem harmless, document it. Report it. Don't brush it off. Because sometimes, the person lying in that hospital bed isn't the victim. Sometimes, they're the predator. And sometimes, the people they're obsessed with don't get a second chance. My name is Tyler, and I'm 31 years old. This happened about a year ago when I was going through a divorce and had to move out of my house in Austin, Texas. I didn't have a place lined up yet, so I rented a storage unit to keep most of my stuff while I figured things out. It was one of those 24-hour access facilities on the outskirts of town. Cheap, convenient, and according to the guy who signed me up, totally secure. He was wrong about that last part. The storage facility was huge, rows and rows of units in different sizes, all with those orange roll-up doors. My unit was in the back corner of the lot, which I didn't love, but it was the only one available in my price range. The unit number was 394, and it was sandwiched between two other units that appeared to be empty based on the rusty locks. The first few times I went there, it was during the day. I'd load boxes, organize things, and leave without any issues. The facility was pretty dead during the day. I'd see maybe one or two other people, but mostly it was just me and the long concrete corridors between the units. Then one night, about 2 weeks after I'd rented the unit, I needed to grab some work documents I'd packed away. It was around 10 p.m. I figured I'd be in and out in 15 minutes. No big deal. I pulled up to the facility and punched in my access code at the gate. The place was completely empty at night, no cars except mine. The overhead lights cast long shadows between the units, and I could hear my footsteps echoing as I walked to Unit 394. When I got to my unit, I noticed something immediately. The lock was unclasped. Not broken, not cut, just unclasped, like someone had opened it and didn't bother to relock it. My heart started pounding. I opened the roll-up door slowly, and everything looked normal. All my boxes were still there, nothing seemed disturbed. I grabbed my documents quickly and got out of there. I locked the unit properly this time and made a mental note to mention it to the facility manager. Maybe I'd just forgotten to lock it properly last time. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. 3 nights later, I had to go back to the unit again, this time to grab some clothes. It was around 11 p.m. Same situation, empty facility, just my car in the lot. As I walked toward Unit 394, I heard something that made me stop dead in my tracks. Metal scraping against concrete. Like someone was opening one of the roll-up doors. I stood there, listening. The sound came from somewhere close by, maybe a few rows over. Then it stopped. Complete silence. I told myself it was probably just another customer, even though I hadn't seen any other cars. When I got to my unit, the lock was unclasped again. This time, I knew for a fact I'd locked it properly. I opened the door, and my stomach sank. Someone had gone through my boxes. They weren't destroyed or anything, but they'd definitely been opened and rifled through. Personal belongings, old photos, documents, someone had been looking through my stuff. I called the facility manager right there from the parking lot. He said he'd check the security cameras and get back to me. 2 days later, he called and said the cameras in my section had been malfunctioning for the past 3 weeks. Convenient. I decided to set up my own camera. I bought a small motion-activated camera on Amazon and hid it inside my unit, positioned to face the door. If someone was coming in, I'd have proof. That Friday night, I got an alert on my phone at 2:47 a.m. The camera had detected motion. I was at my friend's apartment where I was crashing at the time, so I couldn't get to the facility immediately. I opened the app and watched the live feed. The roll-up door was opening. Slowly. Someone in a dark hoodie was lifting it just enough to crouch down and slip inside. They had a flashlight. I watched in real time as this person walked through my belongings, opening boxes, looking through my things. I called the police immediately. I gave them the address, told them someone was breaking into my storage unit right now, and that I had video evidence. They said they'd send someone. By the time I got to the facility, about 20 minutes later, the police were already there. The person was gone, but my unit was wide open, and things were scattered everywhere. The cops took my statement and said they'd investigate, but without a clear view of the person's face on the camera, there wasn't much they could do. Okay, hold on. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button. Right now. If you're invested in this story, if you want to know how it ends, you need to subscribe so you don't miss the conclusion, or any future stories. This is the type of content you won't find anywhere else, and your subscription keeps it coming. Alright, back to the nightmare. I decided to stake out my own unit. I know that sounds crazy, but I couldn't let this go. The next night, I parked my car a few rows away from Unit 394 and waited. I brought a thermos of coffee and sat there in the dark, watching. Around 1:30 a.m., I saw headlights. A car pulled into the facility, a beat-up sedan with one headlight out. It parked close to my unit, and a man got out. He was wearing the same dark hoodie from the camera footage. He walked right up to Unit 394 like he owned it. That's when I realized something. He wasn't picking the lock. He had a key. He opened my lock with a key, lifted the door, and went inside. I called the police again, but this time I didn't wait for them. I got out of my car and walked toward my unit. My hands were shaking. When I got close enough, I shouted, "Hey! What the hell are you doing?" The man came out of the unit fast. He looked at me, and I saw his face clearly under the overhead light. It was the guy from the front office. The same guy who had rented me the unit. He didn't run. He just stood there, holding a box of my stuff. "You weren't supposed to be here," he said calmly. "You've been breaking into my unit?" I shouted. "You have a key?" He shrugged. "I have keys to all the units. That's my job. Your job isn't to steal people's shit." He laughed. "I'm not stealing. I'm looking." "Looking for what?" "Valuables. Information. Whatever's useful." He said it like it was the most normal thing in the world. "You'd be surprised what people leave in these units. Social security numbers, bank statements, jewelry. You left some good stuff in here." I heard sirens in the distance. His expression changed. He dropped the box and walked quickly to his car. I thought about chasing him, but honestly, I was terrified. He drove off before the cops arrived. The police tracked him down the next day. Turns out, he'd been doing this for months, breaking into units, stealing personal information, and selling it online. He had a whole operation going. Multiple storage facilities, multiple aliases. I wasn't his only victim, not even close. He's in jail now, facing multiple charges for identity theft and burglary. I moved everything out of that storage unit immediately and found a new place to live shortly after. But the worst part? I later found out he'd used my personal information to open 2 credit cards in my name. It took me months to sort out that mess. So here's my advice: never assume your stuff is safe just because it's behind a locked door. Background check the people who have access to your belongings. And if you're renting a storage unit, get your own lock, don't use the one they provide. Use a lock only you have the key to. Because sometimes, the person with the master key isn't there to protect your stuff. They're there to take it. My name is Vanessa, and I'm 25 years old. This happened 6 months ago in Atlanta, Georgia. I was working late one Friday night at a restaurant downtown, and I needed to get home. It was around midnight, and I'd taken a rideshare to work earlier that day, so I didn't have my car. I did what I always do, I opened the app and requested a ride. What happened next almost cost me my life. The app said my driver would arrive in 4 minutes. His name was Brian, 5-star rating, over 2,000 trips completed. The car description matched a gray Honda Accord. Everything looked legit. When the car pulled up, I checked the license plate like you're supposed to. It matched. I got in the back seat and said, "Hey, how's it going?" The driver, Brian, smiled at me through the rearview mirror. "Good, good. Long night?" "Yeah, work was crazy," I said, buckling my seatbelt. I was exhausted and honestly just wanted to get home. We drove in silence for a few minutes. I was scrolling through my phone, not really paying attention to the route. Then I noticed we were taking a different way than usual. I always take the same route home, so I know it well. "Hey, where are we going?" I asked. "This isn't the usual way." He looked at me in the mirror again. "There's construction on your usual route. This way is faster. Don't worry." I checked the app. It showed we were still en route, so I didn't push it. But something felt off. We drove for another 5 minutes, and the neighborhood started looking less familiar. We weren't in downtown Atlanta anymore, we were heading toward the outskirts, toward areas I didn't recognize. The streets were darker, less populated. "Excuse me, where are we?" I asked, my voice a little sharper now. "Shortcut," he said. "Relax." That word, relax, made my skin crawl. I looked at the app again, and that's when I saw it. The GPS dot showing my location wasn't moving correctly. It was jumping around, like the signal was being blocked or interfered with somehow. "I think there's something wrong with the app," I said. "Can you just take me back to the main road?" He didn't respond. He just kept driving. My heart started racing. I looked at the door handle, debating whether I should just jump out at the next stop sign. But we were on a road with no lights, no houses, no people. Where would I even go? I decided to call someone, anyone. I pulled out my phone and dialed my roommate. It rang once, then the call dropped. I tried again. Same thing. I looked at my phone. No signal. Why don't I have signal? I asked, panic creeping into my voice. Brian looked at me in the mirror again, and this time, his expression was different. Cold. "Cell service is spotty out here." "Where is out here?" "This isn't the way to my apartment." He smiled slightly. "I know." That's when I knew I was in serious danger. I tried the door handle. It was locked. I tried to unlock it manually. Nothing. Child lock. "Let me out," I said, my voice shaking. "Let me out right now." He didn't respond. He just kept driving. We were on a dark, empty road surrounded by trees. No buildings. No streetlights. Nothing. I started hitting the window, screaming for help even though there was no one around to hear me. Brian didn't react. He just kept driving calmly, like this was completely normal. Then I noticed something on the passenger seat. A phone. Another phone. I could see the screen was lit up with a rideshare app, but it wasn't his app. It was mine. Or at least, it was showing my trip. But the phone wasn't mine. Whose phone is that? I demanded. He glanced at it, then back at the road. Mine. Why does it have my trip information on it? He laughed. Because I intercepted it. My blood ran cold. What does that mean? It means I wait near the bars and restaurants downtown. I watch for people requesting rides. When they do, I pull up in a car that matches the description, and I use a fake app to make it look like I'm their real driver. By the time they realize what's happening, we're already far away from anyone who can help. I felt like I was going to throw up. What do you want from me? He didn't answer. Listen, I need you to stop and subscribe right now. I mean it. This story gets worse, and if you want to know how I got out of this situation alive, you need to hit that button. Plus, stories like this one, real, terrifying experiences, are what this channel is all about. So subscribe, and let's finish this. I realized I had to do something, or I wasn't going to make it home. I looked around the car for anything I could use. My purse. I had pepper spray in my purse. I'd bought it months ago and never thought I'd actually need it. I slowly unzipped my purse, trying not to draw attention. My hand closed around the small canister. I pulled it out and held it low, out of sight. Where are you taking me? I asked, trying to keep him talking. Somewhere quiet, he said. That was all I needed to hear. I lunged forward and sprayed him directly in the face through the gap between the front seats. He screamed and slammed on the brakes. The car swerved violently and came to a stop in the middle of the road. I yanked on the door handle again, still locked. He was clawing at his face, coughing and yelling. I climbed into the front seat and hit the unlock button on the driver's side door. It clicked. I shoved the door open and threw myself out of the car. I ran. I didn't know where I was, but I ran as fast as I could down that dark road. I could hear him behind me, stumbling out of the car, yelling. I ran into the trees, cutting through branches and tripping over roots. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. After what felt like forever, I saw lights in the distance. A gas station. I ran toward it, bursting through the door and screaming for help. The clerk called 911 immediately. The police found Brian's car abandoned on the side of the road. He was gone. They searched the area but didn't find him that night. However, when they examined the car, they found zip ties, duct tape, and a tarp in the trunk. They also found personal belongings from other women, wallets, IDs, phones. Brian was arrested 3 days later at a motel 2 towns over. He'd been doing this for months, posing as a rideshare driver and abducting women. Most of them escaped or were let go after he robbed them. But 2 women didn't. They're still missing. I don't take rideshares anymore. I just don't. Even when I'm exhausted, even when it's inconvenient, I find another way. Because that night taught me something important. You can do everything right, check the license plate, check the app, check the driver's face, and still end up in danger. So here's what I want you to take away from this: always verify everything. Check the driver's name, the license plate, and the car model before you get in. Sit in the back seat where you can see the driver. Share your trip details with someone you trust. And carry pepper spray. Always. Because the person driving that car might not be who the app says they are. And by the time you figure that out, it might be too late.